called dark guardians, that part of ourselves that we do not heed. And we've been taught to censor ourselves to a pathological degree and are suffering immensely as a result. You can't live in a one-season world. You can try, but sooner or later the winter will come. And it will come too hard and then you'll be perished because you're not acclimatized to it. But this does not mean, I'm not saying that now we become all perverse and criminal. It merely means that we develop our ego maturity to heed those voices that tell us what violates our inner body politic. Your white blood cells, you couldn't live without them. When a disease or something attacks your system, they come to your help. Well, these dark guardians, especially anger, has a blue flame of anger. Watch the movie Hellboy, because that movie will teach you something about the blue flame of anger. It's a defense mechanism. Yes, if you don't integrate it, it'll become pathological and you'll find its muddy boot prints around and it won't be very pleasant. You'll be thinking, what's that smell? And look at all this mess. Yeah, because you haven't welcomed him in and cleaned him off and listened to what he has had to say under all that dust. But they're knocking to get in, going, the house is burning. Open up, let me tell you about it. You go, oh, get away, you. I call the police, get out. The state that is achieved when we cease being sadistic and punitive with ourselves, when we desist seeking the approval of others, when we free ourselves and others from the tyranny of our dependency. There are also factors involved here in the listening to these incredible parts of us. I'll just say, as controversial as it is, and the psychologists actually should have taught you this a long time ago. And the New Age movement, that's defunct in my opinion as well. Because they have not said what I'm going to say now. And that is, you can get out of your mind any idea that anger and hate and violence have ever caused any problems on this earth. Except when they, as I said, become pathological. But actually, we better wake up and realize that not hate, not anger, not violence has ever caused any of the problems that are on this earth at all. And anyone who believes that has got a very, very limited understanding of the world that they're living in. The problems are caused in this world, ladies and gentlemen, not by those things, but by false love. Now, of course, we don't even have that. Deal with your dark content. We barely have the time to do the laundry. We barely have time to catch some sleep or take care of our kids, which is by design. That's stress again. In fact, the 4 best-selling drugs in the nation today are for stress-related health problems: ulcer medications, hypertension treatments, tranquilizers and sleeping pills, and antidepressants. As a nation, we spend an astonishing $650 million per year on sleeping pills alone. 4 million Americans abuse prescription drugs and are addicted to tranquilizers, stimulants, and painkillers. When I first visited this country, I knew something was wrong because when you turn on commercial television, I'm watching advertisements for the most contaminated foodstuffs that you could possibly imagine, and the next commercial is about the medical, getting something to fix it. Some poison. I went, what is wrong with this picture? It's okay to vaccinate yourself and eat contaminated foods that a dog wouldn't eat. Because why? Well, we got a doctor that's going to fix it. Now, many of us sense that something is missing from our lives, and that in our hectic existence, focused on getting pleasure and spending, on having more and achieving more, all these acquisitive drives, we've come to neglect our emotional well-being. Now, Pluto comes in to change that. Pluto is not about acquisition or some kind of attainment in the masculine or yang way that we're so used to. Now, Freud said something very interesting about the ego also. It has to do with our parents. He said that the ego contains or embodies the permissive and prohibitive nature of our parents. And this happens even if you only have a one-parent family. The parent allows you to do certain things and then prohibits you from doing something else. This action on your life creates your conscience because you embody it. And then you know what is right and what is wrong. It's called conscience. It's a word invented by Freud. He called it also the ego ideal or the superego. And the superego is split between the prohibitive and the permissive drives. We all have it. Now, the ego can over-identify with either complex, right? The rebel, as we saw, the hippie, is identifying with the permissive aspects of his consciousness. Nothing wrong with that. But the disciplinarian, the slave of the servant of the Saturnian energy, is overcompensating. He's over-identifying with the punitive or prohibitive aspects. Now, isn't it interesting that if you take it down a notch and come to the political manifestation of what I've just said, you find it that politicians use this Freudian schemata. And we call it conservatism and liberalism. Again, a faux opposition created for you. But it's necrotic and biotic. It's thanatos and eros, played out in the political milieu. Now, one of the other problems why what I'm talking about is often not, dawned on a lot of people is because, you see, cruelty to others is, in fact, well documented, obviously, right? The Hunt for Serial Killers, all the movies about it, the Quest for Justice, all the programs. And, of course, in physical cruelty, when somebody's beating somebody up or murdering, you can call physical police and you can go to court and you can get physical, in-your-face justice about it. But when it's cruelty to the self, who's going to notice? When it's sadism to the self. But my God, cruelty to the self? If you identify with the Father and the prohibitive aspects overly, then you are a walking criminal to yourself. And I am myself personally, you see, not concerned very much with the utter form of crime. I think it's interesting to study. The study will go on, and it's been recognized. We all recognize it. I am infinitely more interested in the unseen form of cruelty that each person does to their own selves, and that must be studied. If you've embodied it because your parents have been rotten, that's probably where it might originate. And they learned it from their parents and so on. But it must stop. For instance, the mystical, remember we were talking about the healthy yogas of the ancient world where they were trying to, condition out the alien gene. Now today when you feel you're not still enough, you don't have any peace, they even sell you that. So now you're thinking some guru on a bed of nails somewhere, some exploiter, another predator, is going to teach you what you need to do because you don't feel that you can control your mind or you'll be still enough. You know all that kind of yoga? It's nothing more than sadism to the self. It's another, I'm not good enough, need to get to God, tell me what to do. And I impose another authority on me. I impose another system or technique. Perhaps one could say that the only healthy form of yoga is the hatha yoga, which is just physical exercises to keep the body kind of healthy. Okay, I can accept that one. But see, most of the other ones, it's nothing but the same old sadism we've been talking about under another name. And this sadism and necrophilia, the true meaning of the word necrophilia is connected to sadism. It's love of death. It's the thanatos. So when you're not integrating your shadow and you're buying into all this lie that we've been describing, you are basically a lover of the dead. You gain, just like when you peel a scab, you have that sort of morbid, pleasure from peeling a scab. Magnify that many, many, many times. Now there's healthy aspects of that as well. When you see the bully in the school who's pulling the pigtails of the little girl, but the teacher's been observing and then comes and gives him a whack, you get a sort of a perverse pleasure out of that, don't you? So we all have it, but in the psychotic people it's very, very enlarged. That whole feeling that they get a deep and abiding pleasure because they have murdered their own selfhood. The person who has murdered their own femininity or masculinity or who have murdered their own selfhood, well, how do you think they're going to operate outside? How do you think they're going to relate to everyone else? They may have the persona so that they appear to be normal, but the person who has murdered themselves in their life cannot be expected to exist rationally. As I said, if the ego is the ghost that has arisen from the grave of the self, then expect it to act in ghoulish ways. If you leave rotten meat out, expect maggots. Don't blame the maggots. So if you see a body politic, you see, that is rotten in this way, that's why. Because the ego is ruling and the self is dead. The executives are out on holiday. So the office manager has become the king. He's a maniac. He's running around telling everybody what to do. Yes, he opens and locks the doors. He washes the floor. He's very official and he gets a lot of things done. So, in fact, technically speaking, the corporation is standing. But it's a very punitive place and you don't want to work there. He's trying to save on light bills. He's bossing everybody around. So the executives have not come in. Spirit is not there. Selfhood is not there. Selfhood has been murdered. And in its place we have something else. And from that we get masochism. Masochism is nothing but sadism to the self. It's just a fancy word for sadism towards oneself. And out of that comes horrors. Your narcissism, your obesity, your bulimia, the body piercing, the drug addiction, the alcoholism. All of this is coming out of a deep and intense violence towards oneself that must end if there's ever to be change in the world. And you must develop the science of observing it, not in others, but in yourself. How do you censor yourself? From that comes the sadism that we're familiar with. The war, the rape, the murder, the misogyny, the megadeath. All of that is a mere external version of something inside. And then it extends even from that point out to nature and to animals. But it's all rooted inside oneself. And what's the cocktail? Obesity, anorexia, insomnia, hypertension.